and welcome once again to another episode of the LOOR Entertainment Podcast. I'm Andrew Southwick. Today's show, we're joined by LOOR CEO Marcus Pittman. Marcus, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We got some interesting stuff to talk about because at least at the time of this production, I think this will get out pretty quickly here, but we just had a Republican debate on Fox News. We had then Donald Trump, who was not at that debate, but sat down with Tucker, did a pre-recorded interview with him. That ran on X, formerly known as Twitter. We'll get into that and whether or not cable is dead. And does art influence culture more than politics? That'll be part of the conversation as well. So we got a lot to cover today. But Marcus, before we get there, you posted on Facebook a little bit ago. You had an opportunity to pitch LOOR to some established VC and so on, and that was a pretty exciting post. I wonder if you could give us a little update just on LOOR's growth, maybe that pitch, and how the information you got there, how it will help LOOR going forward.
Yeah, no, I think it was a really interesting discussion because I think when you start pitching, you pitch anybody who's done start raising capital for a startup, you tend to find your circles and then you invest within those circles. And so with this guy who I was pitching to is an established VC guy. He invested in Google early on, so he's pretty well established in the tech world, startups tech world. And
now VC is venture capital, right?
Yeah, venture capital. So these are the guys, basically the angel guys who just give money for good ideas and so that they can become actual companies and stuff like that. And so, I mean, we're farther along than that at this point, but at one point we were there. And but anyway, so speaking to this guy who I wouldn't say he's a Christian. He's definitely not an evangelical. Might be more on the conservative side. So basically, just hearing our pitch, with just really fresh ears in a completely different world. Like he's not part of the like the new alt tech movement we see now, where you like Public Square, Red Balloon, that sort of thing. Like he's not part of that. Just Silicon Valley guy. And he loved it. He loved LOOR. We're gonna be working a little bit more to basically redo our deck and stuff so it appeals more to like the Silicon Valley types. But he was one of the first guys like that actually knows what he's doing and says this is $1 billion company. So
wow.
Like hearing that was like, wow. Because you pitch it to people all the time. You pitch it. I mean, Christians are the absolute worst it's just true when it comes to venture capital and investing in companies and media and so it's just been it's been a really hard grind, slow, and whatnot. So to hear that from someone who's established and, I pulled the pitch book on him. I have his credentials. He's not, a scam or anything like that. He's a real deal. And so it's just really encouraging to see that. And I think hopefully the next steps is to come out. I'm going to fly out and just meet him in person and knock him, just try to tie him down for an hour and just go through our whole deck and get it VC ready at that level, which is a completely different level than we've been at. So that's really exciting news. One of the things is with LOOR is like you say, well, it seems small, the funding seems slow, but everything we're doing. Actually, let me tell this story.
Sure.
My pastor's son, Nate Wilson, wrote in his book, I forget the name of the book exactly, but he writes about how this time where him and his father were, his father would make him go outside and rake rocks every single day. and he would get mad. Eventually, after like a week or so, he got really mad. And he said, "Dad, I'm so sick of raking rocks. Why are we raking rocks?" And his dad said, "Well, because that we have a rake and we have rocks, and that's what the Lord has given us to build our house right now, and so that's what we're going to do." And so he was raking the foundation for the house, and then slowly over time they did eventually build that entire house as God gave them the supplies to do it. So with LOOR, I feel like that's what we're doing. We're raking rocks. We were taking the money we've been given, we're building something, and we're step by step, and then investors see that. Investors see our growth, they see the user growth, and that's been really exciting to see. So we tend to think really tiny, but on the grander scale, we're actually doing really well. In the long term,
one of the things you mentioned in your post, you said that the VC, I don't know, rep, donor, investor, that he said LOOR was like a 1 in a 300,000 or something company that came along.
yeah,
When I read that, I wasn't sure if that was good or
one,
bad. I'm assuming it was good,
yeah, more
but
than 300 because they take pitches. Most VCs they take maybe 10 pitches a day,
mhm.
right? And then they only invest, so they hear about 300 a month, but they only invest in maybe one company a month,
Hmm.
right? So when a VC says you're 1 in 300, it means you're one of the companies that's worth actually spending some time with, getting to know and stuff like that. So that's big. That was like I was like, wow, that's awesome, because we know that.
Yeah.
We built this. We've been doing this for 3 years, but to hear it from someone completely not in the typical circles was really encouraging and what we needed. And I think that's going to be like that was kind of like one of those breakthrough moments. He reworked our deck already,
Hmm.
in the sense of like now like lore is one of our value props, one of our main value props we're putting up front is like lore is the only streaming platform that lets you spend unlimited money per month. That's a massive benefit for investors,
Hmm.
filmmakers, and it's a benefit for the consumer because they can actually don't have to worry about um, us just arbitrarily raising the prices for no reason whatsoever, as often as Netflix or Disney does, because they can donate to funding projects and movies and TV shows, so that actually increases the monthly subscription overall without us doing it.
So
Netflix and Disney.
let me ask you a couple questions just for people who are not in movie production business and platform startup business and so on. What is a deck, so people understand what that is? And I think of a deck of cards, so
Yeah,
it'll be, but and then also when you say, hey, you can spend to a consumer, your knee-jerk reaction to hear you can spend as much money as you want and that's your benefit to you is like, well, wait a minute, I'd like to not spend money. But how does that, like, what does that mean, particularly, and when an investor sees there's not a limit to what can be spent, what can be invested, so on and so forth. How does that look good on the business side, the viability side? I think you answered it a little bit in saying that that will help to keep monthly prices more more consistent. But start with the deck, and then that value that you see in not having a limit of spending.
yeah. So first, the deck for those that aren't unaware, the deck is basically a 10-page PowerPoint presentation that goes through the problem solution of your company, but it's done in a way that appeals to investors. So that's sort of the thing. And we've gone through, and I don't even know how many decks we've gone through since we've started this, because things change and you always update it and constantly, and you get better. After 3 years of doing this, I'm really good at pitching. Like I can do it in 5 minutes. And so that's everything from beginning to end, about 5 minutes. But so that's what the deck is. It's just a 10-piece slide. That gives the goal of the slide is just to get people interested, to have a further conversation, or at most agree to meet in person. Like that's your goal. Like
So that'd
just
be
get them.
kind of similar, like when we get mailers in our mailbox for the new business in town or something like that. Even though it's one postcard, it's a similar thing. Here's why this is good and why you should be interested.
Yeah, yeah, but more on a financial end. And then
Sure.
and then the other the question you asked was about um how it helps the customer that they can spend as much money as they want.
Yeah.
One is because the customer is the one funding content on our platform, right? They're the ones that's actually building this platform as a whole. But it also helps them because price increases with Netflix and Disney right now are very punitive. They're punishing the customer. Like the price increases aren't providing a benefit. for the customer. One is they're getting rid of password sharing, right? That's a punishment for the customer. That's not helping the customer by getting rid of password sharing. And I would say it's one of the most amazing things that streaming communities did that really built out what a streaming community, what the streaming industry was.
Yeah.
They basically, uh, by the free market, legalized piracy, right? They kind of said, no, it's totally okay on our platforms. And that was a big deal because they were competing with they were competing with like BitTorrent and Napster. Really, that was their main competition at the
Well,
time.
Netflix has had whole social media advertisements bragging about password sharing.
Yeah, HBO had an Oscars joke about it where they put the actual account and password up on the at the Oscars for you to go watch. I think it was like the finale of some show, the Game of Thrones or whatever. It was on at the same time as the Oscars. So one of the Oscars joke was, "Here's a password, go watch it." Right? So, and it was a real working password and account. They disabled it after 24 hours, but the point was that they were very accepting of that. Now they're not. Now you can't do that in Netflix. And so again, that's a punitive punishment. Another punitive punishment is when Netflix says, or Disney, what Disney's doing is Disney is saying we're increasing the cost of monthly subscription by 25% this year. So you don't have a choice in that. They're just doing it. They're just by fiat
they're increasing the cost and reducing the amount of entertainment that you get for those dollars.
Right.
Not insignificantly so.
Yeah, this is why LOOR is really valuable, because everything's independent, and one of the values of a streaming platform like LOOR is we don't own the content, the filmmakers do. We're very, very passionate about that, actually, making sure that the filmmakers own their stories. And one of the benefits to that is when that is the case, and it's purely independent, we don't have to pay for licensing fees split between 6 production companies to stream one piece of content. So when you see HBO and they're getting rid of all this content, even though it's really good content, it's really because there's too many hands on it, and they have to pay a penny for every stream to 6 or 7 different people, because there's all these production companies and all these just lawyers and all this stuff that's just made the value of content so expensive and overinflated. But with us, the filmmaker is really the only one that's getting paid for streaming. And really paid for funding. And so like that's a real value to us because we don't have to worry about that sort of overinflated thing. But like you said, HBO, it's now Max. Isn't that sad? Can we just mention that? Like, it's not HBO anymore? That just is
was weird. That was weird. I mean, I do like the idea of multiple. What's that?
There's no cable brands anymore.
No.
Like, they've all been sucked up. And Adam Conover talked about this. It was a really good clip. He used to do this show called Adam Ruins Everything on True TV. And he was saying that True TV was a profitable cable company, and then they basically sucked it into Max, and now it's an unprofitable content, so it's like they're getting rid of these basically micro niche cable channels, and that were making money, and they're just sucking everything up. And this is another reason why LOOR is going to do well, because we're not Netflix.
And that's a good topic segue into. Let's look at a little bit of debate aftermath. Now, what we're going to talk about here is comparing the viewership of the Fox News GOP debate, which was exclusive in more ways than one, and then of course Donald Trump did a pre-recorded sit down with Tucker Carlson that broadcast at the same time on X, formerly known as Twitter. And I'll disclaim it in this way, that we're not talking in this conversation. The point is not who do you support. We're talking about what was more effective in terms of a media platform and where people are going and the rate of return in terms of engagement, so on and so forth. I do think it's important to add this context as well. Fox, just before a few hours before the debate started, put out a memo threatening legal action if any political commentators, talk shows, etc., used more than 3 minutes, video or audio, of the debate that they were going to broadcast. So, and I'm like, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I mean, even if you were trying now, and I'll say this because you mentioned everything being sucked up into Max and so on and so forth. I just had a conversation with John Speed, and he'll be back on in another episode this week. But we talked about the vertical integration of all these platforms, basically, and you're getting 3 companies emerging as the owners: Amazon, Disney, and Netflix, and what that means. Well, I think that cable, traditional cable, as we've known it, and we'll include satellite in that, are trying to do that as well. And I think that's what Fox was trying to do, was to force everybody to Fox. And not only that, but force everybody to Fox's narrative of that after the fact and their breakdown. And I think there are larger reasons for that, which is another conversation. But at the same time, you had on Twitter, Tucker Carlson's pre-recorded interview with Donald Trump. And as of this production right now, it had over 170 million views. And here again, I don't know how many of those views it scrolled by, so it counted a view. I don't know how they count views, so I want to be careful with that. But and in America, the US itself, which it's going to be Americans who vote, there are only about 25 million Twitter users. So a lot of that's global. It could be some other things, but nonetheless, it does show that there is a seismic shift. And I think the vertical integration shows as well. That is, all these companies buying up things, making exclusive bottlenecks, so you have to go to them. I think that's actually more reflective of the fact that consumers are finding the content other places, and unless they are forced onto that platform, they may very well not use it. Marcus, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, I mean, Fox is thinking like old people when they think that they can limit people to like a certain time. Like first off, there's fair use laws that absolutely reject that completely. As long as you're doing commentary, you can do it as much as you want.
Mm-hmm.
There's there's massive legal precedent for that through YouTube, right? YouTube reactions. Yep. So whoever decided that is probably 70 years old or more.
Well, Fox's average audience now on their cable channel, their average viewer is, I want to say, 62 or 63, and their average online consumers in their mid-50s.
Yeah, they got the BoomerCon market locked up. It's it's a dying market. It's concerning, which to be honest is probably the same market as Pureflix and Great American Country, which is concerning. That's a dying market that's not going to be around a generation from now. That's one of the things Jason Farley always says is LOOR is making content that your kids can pass down to their grandkids. Right? Like that's because we're reaching a younger audience. And we're with stories that they can pass on. So it's a multi-generational sort of company. But with Fox and all those other companies, they're making content for older people. That's their base. So it's really a limited game there. But also just speaking on this, nobody younger is watching cable television anymore. We have YouTube TV, but I don't consider YouTube TV cable television because I just record whatever I want. We fast forward through the commercials. We'll watch something. If there is something coming on live, we'll watch something else until there's enough time to skip past the commercials. It's so we don't. That's we're about 40 years old, and we're not doing it.
That's true. My kids are my oldest is going to be a junior in high school next year, but a couple of years ago was the first time that they have any memory of watching something on an actual standard cable where the programs were scheduled. You didn't have a choice, and you had to sit through commercials, and it wasn't on demand, and you couldn't binge watch and all that stuff. They saw it as kind of a novelty, and so they kind of liked it for the novelty. But they see, particularly television entertainment, in reverse than the way we would, because we have the base of cable and then on demand, and so we see it that way. And we remember when if something was on, that's what was on.
We had to turn it to Channel 3 to play video games, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Like we're the last generation that remembers having to do that.
Yeah.
And so, I remember that with my Nintendo. So television has just shifted so far in our generation, and because we've gone from antenna TVs to RF cable adapters to be able to play your video games. Actually, here's a funny story. I worked at Radio Shack for about 4 or 5 years, but when I worked there, the TiVo came out. And I remember buying my first TiVo. I came home and my mom was like, just thought I just wasted all this money on this thing, and it messed up her TV. She had to learn how to use the TV again. And then I set it up and went to work again the next day. I come home from work and she goes, "I've scheduled all the episodes of Oprah." And we never went back as a family.
Man,
we never went back after TiVo. Like that.
I have my first TiVo experience. I never had one because I've always been slow. I was slow getting a DVD player because I don't know. I just like vintage stuff, and I'm not like an old. Well, I am a curmudgeon. I'm not necessarily stuck on tradition, but it takes me a while to embrace the technology. But anyway, my buddy got a TiVo, and we used it because we would all get together and watch football after church. And I was on the West Coast, and so it's terrible to watch football on the West Coast because half the games are in the morning and you're in church. So anyway, this was a revolutionary idea, right? And my first experience watching football on TiVo, and I think it's why I didn't buy one, was it was a close game. I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan, deal with it. And it was a close game. It was Seahawks Rams. I remember it exactly. And my buddy hit the fast forward and went straight from the middle of the game to the end of the game. And we all were like, no. And nobody saw it. And then, but my buddy did. He saw the final score and he saw what happened. And he said, Don't worry, guys. I'll go back to where we were. I remember where we were. But I did see the ending. And he said, but I'm not going to tell you. But I will say this. He said, I know who won and I know how we did it. And I'm like, oh, thanks, dude. Anyway, that's my TiVo experience.
But yeah, no. I mean, just in general, that was a great early tech company.
Yeah, yeah.
I still think their remote and user experience was probably better than anything that's still on the market today. I still remember the boop boop every time you fast forward and stuff. Like it was just. And this is something that still bugs me to this day that TiVo had that nobody else does. I don't know if they have a patent on it. They probably do. But when you would fast forward really fast and you stop, it would backtrack to right where you hit that button every time. Like nobody does that. Nobody does it. When you fast forward really fast, it always is like.
Yeah, it never hits it. It's almost like your 10-second. When you hit the button, there's another 10 seconds you miss anyway.
TiVo read your mind.
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome. So that's just like they had just all these little simple things that really made it. That got people ready, really, for what we have now with YouTube TV and stuff. And
do you see well, you must, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit with all this migration. I'll say this though, in terms of the cable TV industry, I think the one thing that is keeping cable TV afloat still is live sports, and particularly the NFL, because it's so profitable. All the advertising is so profitable, and I think they're trying to move. What's that?
YouTube TV has a license for Red Zone now.
I know, but they bought that from DirecTV, and it's still like DirecTV's Sunday Ticket and all that Red Zone stuff still didn't kill cable yet. I think they're gonna, because if the NFL could have specific streaming options that were more tiered in pricing, like if you could buy one team or one conference as opposed to the whole thing, right. I think that would be the death knell. But right now, I mean, the commercials, even for regular football games, are orders of magnitude more than for a sitcom or for during the news or for primetime or anything. So that's really a boon for for cable, and the live sports is always a problem. And then all the blackout things and the geographic restrictions for viewing, all that stuff's got to be figured out. But the reason those are there is because of money. And I think that's what's buoying them. Now, having said that, we all know it's hemorrhaging and dying, and everybody's consuming online and on demand and on Twitter, like we saw with Tucker and Trump. And how do you think that gives LOOR an advantage, and how are we setting up, and how is LOOR set up and maybe poised or trying to position to take advantage of this continually rising tide?
Well, the advantage is that we are a niche. Think of us as a niche cable company. So basically, what we have now are we have 4 major antenna TV channels, right? Like just like ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox. Those are the 4 broadcast channels. Fox didn't even come on to the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So, but
yep.
the main for most of television, it was 3: ABC, CBS, and NBC, and then Fox came in the 80s. But also, you had I think you got the CW. I think they count as a broadcast too, but nobody watches the CW. But so you had 4 major antenna channels, broadcast. These are called broadcast channels, and those 4 broadcast channels are really where most of our television came from for most of early television history. And then cable TV happened. And when cable TV happened, what you had was basically a gold rush for cable TV channels. And I've listened to tons of these stories. You can listen to podcast Business Wars. They have ESPN versus Fox sports. Really great breakdown of like early cable and basically how ESPN came from like nothing and became just this massive empire. And then Fox Sports, was this massive empire as well. And so you basically see, but they all these cable companies, whether it's Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon or Food Network or MTV or, I think there was a car channel one time, like all these cable channels were because we could, they realized we could go after really niche ideas and find those people. Just same way YouTube, there's YouTubers that have 7 million or more subscribers, and they just talk about video games, right? Like they're just like a video game cable channel. Insanely profitable, insane amount of views, but it's because the internet allows us to find large, massive niches. However you say it. So that's really the value for LOOR, is that we can really be basically like a TV channel for independent conservative filmmakers, and that can be insanely profitable. And our content is funded by the subscriber. So
yeah. One of the things, and this will be we have to do a little clickbaity thing, but that's okay. One of the things that we've seen in recent days, and particularly in the niche and the viral content and so on, of course, Oliver Anthony and the Richmond, north of Richmond, and that kind of thing, and we saw that explode. I mean, no one knew who he was. No one had heard of him. He was a dude in the woods playing a dobro by himself 3 weeks ago, literally 3 weeks ago. And then it was so impactful or so viral, I should say, that the Fox News debate led with a question about his song. Did you see that last night?
I did not watch the debate. I watched Tucker.
Okay. The first question they had was, what do you think about Richmond, north of Richmond? And is that a, describing the sentiment for America and things like that. And so you have this, I mean, it was so influential that it made its way onto the GOP debate stage and on the Fox News. And of course, everybody and their mother was playing the song and reacting to the song and all that kind of thing. And then you have the chart success, and he's got 3 songs in the top 5, and no one's done that forever and a day, and a new song that debuts at number 3 or number 1 or wherever the heck it is now. That brings the question, there's the chicken or the egg argument. Does art imitate life? Does life imitate art? And then of what are those? And then of art, which is more influential? You have art, you have politics, you have, our cultural, social things, so on and so forth. I'm curious to know too, because let me back up. Let me say it this way. Right now in history in America, we have all this censorship, all this seemingly rejection of free speech and free ideas. I mentioned that just with Fox News limiting how people can analyze their product last night, almost to the point where it's impossible because 3 minutes doesn't do justice for a 2-hour program, not to mention with 8 different people on it. So so you have people that want to be gatekeepers, but I'm wondering if all this gatekeeping, all the consolidation with Netflix, Amazon, Disney, news channels, so on and so forth, if all of that has more to do with being the gatekeeper of the information flow and trying to quell things or phenomena, I don't know the plural of that, phenomena, of things like an Oliver Anthony, Richmond, north of Richmond, that just explodes and gets into the social conscience and gets people to evaluate where things are at. That's terrible grammar, but anyway, where things are in the current moment in history. You mentioned to me off air that you think that art influences culture more than politics. We would look at our culture right now and say, my gosh, look at all the politics that's happening right now. Everything's politicized. Health is politicized. Climate's politicized. Gender is politicized. Sex is politicized. Entertainment's politicized. Sports is politicized. Medicine is politicized. Everything. There's nothing you can do that doesn't have some kind of political angle to it that gets you canceled or fired or whatever else. Either in the social media sphere or in the public square. But then you have the Richmond, north of Richmond, Dobro in the woods come out and do more quote unquote business than any of those, at least in a shorter amount of time, than any of those other long-term conversations. What's more influential, art or politics, and why?
Yeah, I think I'm going to stand with the quote that says culture is politics is downstream from culture, right? So culture is what influences our politics, 100%. The weird thing, Jason Farley is the one that basically called this out for me, but I think is really important, is that conservatives, our art and our entertainment is politics now. Like, that's a weird thing. It's almost something like you would think from like ancient Rome, right? Where they're the gladiators fighting and it's all political for the, whatever. But it's almost like that. But yeah, no, like Tucker Carlson is our Beyonce. I mean, it's weird. That was a weird reference. But
wow.
he is. Like, he's Taylor Swift. Tucker Carlson can fill stadiums. Trump can fill stadiums. Though that's our celebrities on the like that's how conservatives do entertainment. And it's awful. and I love Trump and I love Tucker, but that's not how you influence culture. And so then you have someone like Oliver Anthony, who does a song, and it's immediately, pushed out there, goes, I don't know if the gatekeepers were aware of it before it came out or not, but there are some stories that it was astroturfed a little, but it doesn't matter, because ultimately it reached the people in a way the Ben Shapiro show can't. Right? Like, nobody is talking about a Ben Shapiro episode the way they're talking about Oliver Anthony. No one's talking about The Blaze the way they're talking about Oliver Anthony. That's not an insult to them, but that's just because art resonates more than political talk show can ever do. So that's just how it is. Like, Oliver Anthony became a #1 single on Billboard, his song, overnight. It was insane.
Let me bring, as I like to do, let me bring some cold water and a wet blanket to the conversation. Yeah. It's my it's my superpower. Okay. So you mentioned our art, and I say our conservatives.
Yeah.
Is politics. And I heard a political strategist, a political operative, a conservative political operative make this point, and I think there's some value to it as to why, for example, conservatives are so bad at actually moving our agenda forward in the country, and why our grassroots are not good, because we spend all our money on conferences, whereas progressives and liberals spend their money in cities, in communities, with street leaders and so on and so forth. We on the conservatives like to put up or raise up the Oliver Anthonys of the world and the Tucker Carlsons of the world, and we want to go see them. And our idea is, come to this big arena and see them instead, and on one day, instead of being really active. I don't want to say evangelist, but an activist, an effective communicator for our point of view, for our perspective, for the country in communities. So, and one of the things that I'm not concerned about, but I raise my eyebrow a little bit, because we're in such an era of virtue signaling where it seems like accomplishment if we change our avatar on our Facebook, or change the picture of our Facebook avatar for a few weeks and say that, hey, I'm with you. That seems to be, and that's not even just a conservative thing. I think that's a social thing too. But we conservatives, we tend to do this quite a bit. But okay, I posted that thing, so I'm with you. So I did my duty. So because there is a disconnect. If so many people, like I'm sure you've seen the Black Americans respond to Richmond, north of Richmond, the whole thing, and trying to get the whole idea that, well, we've got, what's that?
They're crying watching it.
They're crying watching it. Yet many, I mean, if you got 7 million, 11 million views, all this kind of stuff, if the sentiment of that song is true and people are really feeling that way, the confession or the reality we have to face is that there's some point where that crystallization of what's going on and what we're actually doing on the ground with our vote, with our influence person to person, is different, because we still allowed these leaders and these corporations and all this stuff to go on in our culture. Like if politics is downstream from culture, then our politics is a mirror of where we are, and where we are we don't like, but we're the ones that took us to where we are. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think the point is that the guys on the street corner selling drugs in the inner city are not talking about Tucker Carlson. They're not talking about Ben Shapiro. They're not talking about political talk radio, conservative politics. They are talking about Oliver Anthony's song. They are talking about, whoever, Taylor Swift's hitting $2 billion on her tour and stuff like that. So that sort of cultural mainstream. They're not having conversations about Thomas Sowell's books on economics on the street corner. It's just not happening. But art is being used as a means to at least generate those discussions. And the thing is, once you have the artist, because art is such a strong motivator, right? Because it goes right for the heart, and we know like the Bible says, the heart is deceitfully wicked above all things. Who can know it, right? So once you can get, a leftist artist to convince someone's heart of, I don't know, communism with art, they're locked in. It doesn't matter the facts you give people; they're locked in, and that's what we're seeing right now. And so what we need is art that does the opposite, that inspires them, was exactly what Oliver Anthony's song inspires them with freedom and not being a slave to the government. And these are all things everybody resonates with. Even the inner city communities resonate with this. And I think Oliver Anthony's song was the first time someone who was conservative reached a lot of people in the inner city. Probably not since Trump. I think Trump had a lot of credibility in the inner cities. He was a I mean, hip hop artists were huge fans of Trump. Wrote many songs. Many raps have been written with Trump as a reference, right? So,
Yeah.
there's a YouTube video I was watching the other day about all these songs where they talk about Trump in hip hop. He's like an icon until he became president, and then it's like, oh well, gotta stick with the art, right? But I think so. So I don't think there's been someone that's reached that level of urban culture for conservatives, not since Kanye, at least. Kanye probably, but it does happen. I think that's why. I mean, when Kanye starts talking conservative politics, he becomes one of the biggest threats in America because you have a billionaire hip hop artist.
Is it too much of a leap to say that maybe one of the, I don't know if it's a goal, but I guess in terms of influence, it would have to be that one of the goals of LOOR is to be one of those voices and to have opportunities for multiple other voices to have those same kinds of impacts and influence in culture.
Yeah, absolutely. We want our artists to be culture makers, right? That's that's the goal. There's no such thing as neutral art, right? Like every art has a viewpoint from the artist. So sit there and say, well, we're gonna make art that's not politically motivated. It's just an outright lie. It's impossible. It's just not true. And so I don't. And if it is true, like if you actually make a piece of art that's not politically motivated or tell some sort of political viewpoint over your worldview, you just get either just random strokes on a canvas hung up at a museum, right? Or you get pretty much a Pure Flix Hallmark rom-com, right? Which is still preaching something. It's just obvious and inoffensive about it, so it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. So like those are the two extremes. But that's the lie of postmodern art, is where you can just tell an art that the viewer can just interpret it how they want. That's not true. Like, or the artist can make art without any sort of viewpoint whatsoever. It's just not possible. If the artist, takes two strokes on a canvas and says this is the art, it was definitely politically motivated. It's for it's for tax evasion and money laundering, right? Like they sell it for like $100,000. I posted it on Facebook. Like they sell it for $100,000, and then they sell it to a politician for $100,000. The politician gets it appraised for $20 million. And then they sell it to a museum for $20 million, and then they get that sort of tax write-off on the or they donate it for $20 million, right? And then they get the tax write-off. So that's how the art world works. I've spoken to an artist who was a painter for some of the mega galleries. There's only 4 of them in the country, and it was all money laundering for the Bidens and Clintons. He'll tell that. I don't know if he wants to tell that story, but he should tell that. He should tell that story. So he quit because he didn't want to be a part of that. But that's how postmodern works. And I think we've taken that lie for the purposes of money laundering and tax evasion. We've taken that lie as conservatives and embraced it, and instead of actually. At the very least, we said, well, we're not going to invest in art because it has no value and it's all used for money laundering. And as opposed to saying, no, there's a correct form of art that does have value. We've kind of embraced the postmodern lie, even if we don't believe it. But we've decided art is not worth investing in because of postmodernism. And that's a big mistake.
And that follows, some of the postmodernist presuppositions that if there is a truth, it's completely relative, so there really isn't one, and you leave everything up to an interpretation which is subject to the mood and the feeling of the moment, and you can, or at least they try to make that seem plausible, which again, I'm saying is not. Want to get one other question here. We got a couple minutes left. speaking of LOOR and LOOR's place in the cultural sphere as it grows, and potentially thinking of the potential of that the VC sees in it, and that certainly many others are seeing in it for LOOR consumers. Right now, we've got shows that are being funded, and some of them are nearing their funding goals. What show or shows on LOOR are productions on LOOR that are not yet funded, but are getting there and maybe picking up some momentum? Are you looking at? Are you most excited about sharing with our audience?
Yeah, so a lot of things coming out. Very soon we're going to be launching. I would actually think probably by the time this podcast airs, maybe soon. I got to figure out the exact date, but we're just going to drop American Live, which is a comedy special we're going to drop, and me and Jason will be doing some Twitter Spaces on it before it launches and stuff, because it's an R-rated comedy special. It'll be very interesting to see how people respond to it. It's a politically conservative comedy special, and me and Jason think it's important that people know what's happening in the underground comedy clubs in the world, whether you agree with the jokes or the comedians or not. Whether you find some of the jokes offensive or unnecessarily vulgar or not, there is a movement happening across the country in these dark underground cold comedy clubs, and it is incredible. And I think Jason says it best. What's happening in these comedy clubs now, a generation from now, is going to be the primary topic of movement of the culture. Like, this is where culture begins. It starts in these little underground clubs where people aren't canceled for laughing at a joke. And then if you and you see, so this was American Live was done in L.A., downtown L.A., sold out in leftist California, conservative comedy show, just stomach wrenchingly funny at times, and somehow we got the rights for it. So I think it would have never made it on PureFlix. It probably might even be too edgy for. Oh, it's definitely too edgy for Angel. It might have been too edgy for Daily Wire or whatever. There was really no place for it, and we said, you know what, this needs to, like, Christians need to be aware of this so they can get involved, and like, because we need the Christian comedians to really start, like, now's the time to not be a church comedian and actually get out there and do some comedy that's actually cutting, and damaging to the leftist worldview. And so that American Live, it's really great. It's legitimately funny. And to sum it all up, the headliner was the Christian in this thing. Not everyone there is a Christian comedian, but the headliner was, and people came out there to see the Christian. It was really cool. There's a scene in there. This is a whole. Me and Jason will be doing a whole different conversation on this, because we think this is part of a bigger movement of conservative comedy that's happening on a much bigger scale than people are aware of right now. That's why we want to put this out there. There was only 50%. One of the comedians got up and said, "How many of you guys are Christians?" And only about 50% of people clapped. But they were all there for the conservative comedy. And then another guy tells, this is one of the key moments. I don't know if people think this heavily, like deeply, about a comedy special, but there was a moment where a guy tells a joke that's kind of offensive to Christians, and he's booed. And it's one of those moments, and he retreats from that joke and continue. And I was talking to Jason about it. He was like, "We need Christian hecklers in comedy clubs." Like that. He retreated from that joke and continued on with his set, and it restrained him. So it's just really, it's really cool. Like, you have to look at it as this. I'm trying to, like, you have to present it like a documentary of this thing that's happening. I think, like, if you're never really into edgy comedy or anything like that, just look at what's happening in our culture, and look at this art form that is being used right now to really change the course of our country, and that's how you know. I mean, this is sold out in downtown LA, right?
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't think a conservative comedy show where they're joking about LGBT and transgender movement and vaccines and COVID jokes, all this sort of stuff, right in the middle of downtown LA. I think people are going to love the show. I think some people are absolutely going to hate it. It might be too much for them, but I think it's important. So that is something that's coming out relatively very soon. So I'm excited to see it. I'm excited for you guys to see it. Um, uh, I think it's going to be good for lore. Um, like even with outrage, I think it's going to be
Hmm.
good for lore, and there's going to be outrage for it. And that's exactly what comedy should do.
Well, and
Um,
that if you're able to take that and turn it into any kind of positive dialogue as well, there can be some value that can come out of
that's
that
the goal. Like that's
if
the
possible.
right. You know, I mean, the left. We have Dave Chappelle is not a conservative, but he does just a little bit of conservative jokes, and he becomes this much bigger than he was.
Hmm.
Right? So let's take a Dave Chappelle. Well, what's happening right now is people are trying to be Dave Chappelle, but for conservatives. Dave Chappelle, like you got a long ways to go. He's one of the best in the world. He is the best. He's the GOAT. But what I'm saying is like that kind of comedy where it's attacking a group of people in a comical way. What Dave Chappelle does it with race. He
Yeah.
makes white people laugh at themselves. He makes black people laugh at themselves. Asians laugh at themselves. That's why it was so dangerous because he was actually disrupting the racial narrative.
Hmm.
When you had the blind KKK member sketch that he did like that's
Yeah.
disruptive critical race theory, right? Like that is very dangerous. You can't get so anyway, so that's how dangerous comedy is. I think in order for comedy to specifically in order for Christians in comedy to succeed, there needs to be a place, there needs to be a venue where they can compete with the world
Hmm.
on that scale. And we can't say we're not gonna let we're gonna like just silo Christian comedians into these safe little church comedy um, sort of things. So we decided, when we were at this event, we were like, okay, we have to have comedy that's not dry. And it's had like that's what's going to happen. And because comedians have to fail. Like they have
Hmm.
like you in order for a comedian to perfect his craft, he has to tell bad jokes that get moans. Right? He has to go, okay, oh yeah, okay, you need to step back from that. But if you just read the script beforehand, before they do it, you never get true comedy. You get a recital.
I think
Um, and
I
that's
think
hard to explain to people, but
I think here it is. The we are in we're in a spiritual battle every day. Apostle Paul tells us that our battle's not against flesh and blood, right?
mhm.
We're certainly in a spiritual war and a civil war in our country. And what Christians have been able to do, this is a generalization, not all, but Christianity in the West as a thing. We have tried to make the battle safe, sanitized, and secure within our walls. And
Mhm.
you can't fight a safe battle. You have to be on the battlefield. It's not going to be inherently safe. It's not going to be inherently secure, but it can, I think, make a significant difference. And I think that's what, at least some of what I hear you saying, and not only is it some of the reasons why we'll be dropping that comedy show very soon, but also why we're excited about Lure and its growth and its potential to really impact and influence culture, as we've been talking about on this episode. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah. I'm excited for it to drop. Insanely nervous for it to drop, and I can't wait to see how people respond, and hopefully they believe it's as important as we do. And so they'll be very interesting. And then of course you'll be able to get to decide if you want to see the second episode by funding your loot. So You can buy
There
gold.
you go.
If you want to fund it, you fund another episode. But that we're going to issue the pilot, and you guys can check it out. So
there you go. Well, as you can see, all kinds of stuff. I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Go ahead.
No, I just said don't watch it with your kids. It is an adult comedy show for when your kids go to bed. So just be very clear about that. We don't want to pull any punches on that.
Very good. All right, well, there you have it. Lots of stuff at LOOR coming up, lots of projects, lots of exciting things just around the corner. And the way you're going to be able to see them is to subscribe to LOOR.tv, LOOR.tv. You see it at the bottom of the screen. Subscribe today. Fund the projects that Holly wouldn't make a difference in this, in our culture, in a way that only art and artists and creators can do. Of course, they need the support of the people. That's what we're doing, connecting those two things together at LOOR.tv. Subscribe today. Marcus, thank you for being with us today. For Marcus Pittman, I'm Andrew Southwick. This has been the LOOR Entertainment Podcast, and we'll see you next time.